Hi, my name is Kelly Cheatham. I'm a digital learning specialist for Fort Worth ISD. In this episode of Tips and Tricks, we're going to talk Google Forms. We're going to look at some different things to consider when you're creating your form, and we're going to focus on creating those forms in a quiz assignment in Google Classroom. So to get started, I have pulled up the class that I'd like to use, and I have gone to the classwork tab. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Create button, and I'm going to choose Quiz Assignment. The cool thing about using quiz assignment in Google Classroom is that it will automatically create a Google form for you that is in what's considered quiz mode. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means as we start building it. So from this screen here, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to name my quiz. So I'm going to call this quiz Grammar Quiz. And I can go ahead and give the instructions as I need. But to actually create the quiz, we're going to click on the attachment here. So when I created it, it automatically attached this blank quiz. I'm going to just click on it to open it in a new tab. So we'll open up this Google form here, and you'll notice that currently it is named blank quiz. So the first thing we'll want to do is rename it. So I'm going to just click up where the title is, and I'm going to rename it Grammar Quiz. And I'm just going to go ahead and say week 1. To rename the actual file, you'll notice right now it still says blank quiz. All I need to do is click up where it says blank quiz, and now I can go ahead and type in the correct name. Okay, so now my quiz is named and ready to go. So as a reminder, I mentioned that when we create this Google form through the quiz assignment feature in Google Classroom, it automatically generates this Google form in what's called quiz mode. When you are creating a form from your drive, so instead of going through Classroom, from your drive, it creates it in what's considered survey mode. And so the option to turn on and access the answer key is not on by default. So if that's the case, you'll need to actually go into your quiz settings. You'll notice that you have 3 tabs at the top. When you go to quizzes, you have the option to turn on that quiz mode or make it a quiz. But again, because we created it from Google Classroom, it already did that for us. And while we're in here, you'll notice that it has some preset settings here. So you'll notice that right now it is set to release that grade right after they submit. If that's not something I want to happen, I can go ahead and turn it on for later. And then I can also control what my students can see after they've submitted the quiz. So in this case, they're going to be able to see all of their missed questions, as well as the correct answers and the point value for that question. But again, I can check or uncheck any of those boxes. Over in the general, you'll notice that right now it's set to collect email addresses. That was turned on because I set it so that it would send those results later. So by doing that, it turned on that collecting email addresses. You'll notice that right now it's also restricted to Fort Worth ISD only. I can also come in here and I can make it so they can only take the quiz one time just by clicking on that box. A quick note down here, if you turn on this feature to edit after submit, you're not going to be able to track each submission's results, not easily at least. So I would recommend not turning that on now. That's something we can check later on. If we have our students, if they've taken it and we want them to go back then, we can go ahead and check it then. But for now, I'm going to leave it unchecked. I'll click on Save, and now my quiz is ready to build. Now, first big tip here. The first question you want to ask in your quiz needs to be an identifier. So I like to start with first name, and I like to separate out first name and last name so that I can sort that data later. So I've created a question for first name. You'll notice that it automatically made it a short answer question. According to my answer key, it's worth 0 points, which is what I'd like for now. So I'm going to leave that as is. The last thing I want to do is make it required so my students cannot skip it. I'm going to go ahead and generate another question for last name. So again, I like to have those separately so I can sort the data really easily. You'll notice it's short answer automatically. It is required, but by default, it gave this a point. So I want to go in and change it so it's ungraded. I'm going to click on answer key here, and then I'm going to change the number of points to 0. If you are a teacher who teaches multiple classes, your next question will probably need to be something like period, or it might be homeroom teacher, something along those lines, so you can identify which class is taking this quiz. Again, this helps when you sort the data later if you wanted to look at it in a spreadsheet. So I like to ask this question, and typically I choose a drop down for this, and I might say, I'm just going to leave it at those. And again, by default, it gave it a point. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 0 points so it's not worth anything. So you want to start with those identifiers. If you teach older students who are able to do so, you might want to ask a question for their ID number. That will be helpful when you are adding those grades to your focus. So it might be helpful to ask that as a question here. If you ask younger students, it may not be worth it. All right, so now I'm ready to start actually building the questions. So I can either just keep adding, or I could add a new section. So this is my identifying section. Now we're going to add the real questions. So I'm not going to title this. We're going to leave it blank. And now I'm going to add a brand new question. As you're building the questions in your quiz, okay, you want to make sure that you're using the answer key feature here. So I'm just going to add some random answer options here. When we use this answer key feature, we're able to choose the correct answer, and this is what allows your Google form to auto grade. Okay, and you know that it will auto grade because you'll see that check mark on your editing end. So that tells you that you have selected the correct answer, and the point value should be reflected in the bottom here. I'm just going to build one more quick question for us, and then we'll look at the actual taking of the quiz and the results. Okay. Again, I would build this with real content. This is just for demo purposes. All right. So when you are ready to have your students take the quiz, this auto saves. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this tab, and we're going to go back to the assignment in Google Classroom. The first thing you want to do is make sure you have grade importing turned on. If you have a single attachment, so just the quiz, you will have this option. If you have multiple attachments on this assignment, you will not be able to use this grade importing feature, so I'd highly recommend not having multiple attachments. On the right-hand side, you'll set up your different settings here. So I'm just going to give it a due date, and I'll give it a topic. I'll put it in today, and then a quick grading category. And when I'm ready, I'm just going to go ahead and click Assign. All right, so now our assignment is out there, so we're going to wait for some students to start taking it. Okay, so once your students have taken the quiz, you can go in and view their results by clicking on the assignment and then clicking on View Assignment, and it will open up to the student work view. Now keep in mind, with a Google form, each student is not going to have an attachment, so you won't see anything under that student's name. To see their actual results or their actual answers to the questions, you'll actually have to click on the quiz itself. So if I wanted to see what the student did, I can click on the attachment. It's going to open in this view that students will see, but because I created this quiz, in the bottom right-hand corner, I'll see a little pencil. And so when I click on this, I'll get back to my editing view. In my editing view, you notice that we have two tabs at the top. I have questions, and that's where we built our form, but I also have responses. So if I want to see an individual student's responses, I can click on this responses tab. And the default view here is the summary view. So it's just going to show me as a whole, as a class, how did we do? And so I'll get some insights, I'll see the frequently missed questions, etc. If I want to look at it by question, I can click on this little question tab, and now I can view specifically all of the answers on question 1. So I only have one student who took it, but I see his answer listed here. I would see all of my students if I had more students. The last view you have is this individual view, and this allows you to see an entire response. So this is this one student's entire response. And to toggle between students, we can either use this drop down right here, or I can click on the arrows to the right of it. All right, the last view we have in our actual quiz itself is a spreadsheet view. And so you'll notice on the responses tab, at the very top, I have the little spreadsheet icon. When I click on this, I'm prompted to create a new spreadsheet or select an existing spreadsheet. And when I click on Create here, it's going to put the results in a Google Sheet for me. So I can see it in a nice spreadsheet. Now, as a reminder, I recommend creating separate questions for first name and last name. And the reason for that is that now that I'm in a spreadsheet, I can easily sort my data so that they are in alphabetical order by last name. And now in this case, I only have one student response, but if I had multiple student responses, I would just select all of the data. So I clicked over in this box right here on the left-hand side, right above the 1, to select everything. And now I can come into my menus. I can go to Data, and I can sort. I like to go down to Sort Range here. And now I can choose, my data does have a header. And now I can select last name here. If you have multiple classes taking the same exact form, you can even sort twice. So the first thing I can sort by is by period, and then I can add another sort column, and this time I can sort by last name. And that will put my students in alphabetical order by period. And so that makes it really easy for me to then enter that data into Focus if I need to. So viewing student responses, you need to go into the form itself and either view them on the Responses tab or by opening a spreadsheet. But now that I have those responses viewed and we're ready to go, and so the last thing we need to do is pull the scores into our Google Classroom gradebook. And to do that, we're going to come back to Google Classroom. We're going to come back to that student work view. And you'll notice that because I turned on grade importing when I set up this quiz, I have the option over on the right-hand side to import grades. Those scores will not populate your gradebook until you click on this button. But once you click it, any students who have completed the quiz will have their grades automatically inputted into your gradebook here. Now keep in mind that as new students complete the quiz, if you've already imported those grades, you will have to do it again. So each time you have new students complete the quiz, you'll have to click on Import Grades for those grades to populate. And then the final thing you'll want to do so that your students can see their grade is return any graded work. And so I'm going to return just the turned in submission to the student by selecting his name here and then clicking the return button at the top. Okay, so to recap, when you're creating a quiz assignment, the first thing you want to remember is to do it through Google Classroom so it's automatically created as a quiz. As a reminder, if you do it through your Google Drive, you will have to go into your quiz settings. Once you're in your quiz, remember to set up your identifying questions first. So I recommend doing first name and last name separately. If you need to add something about period or class, that would be a good thing to ask as well. And then if you teach older students, you may want to ask for their ID number. Again, that helps when importing those grades into Focus. And then you'll ask your content questions and just make sure that you have set your answer key correctly so that it auto grades. Once you've done all of that, you can go ahead and assign it to your students, and then you can come back into the quiz itself to view those individual responses. You can also view them in that spreadsheet view. The final thing you need to do is import your grades by going back to Google Classroom and clicking on that Import Grades button so that they populate in your gradebook. Okay, so that's it for tips and tricks for Google Forms. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or to your digital learning specialist.